Jamal Thompson poured his heart into a dish at a high-profile gala, only to have billionaire Marcus Blake mock him in front of everyone. Marcus, arrogant and dismissive, belittled years of dedication with a single sneering remark that could have crushed any aspiring chef's spirit. But Jamal didn't back down. He returned with one flawless bite of his signature short rib that left Marcus speechless and desperate for the recipe. Just wait until you see how Jamal's skill and perseverance turned humiliation into triumph, and why justice ultimately prevailed. Marcus Blake lounged in his chair like a king surveying a court, his tailored suit crisp, his gold cufflinks catching the light of the chandeliers overhead. He had built an empire from nothing, and the world knew it. Wealth, power, and influence seemed to follow him wherever he went. Tonight, he was the center of attention at the city's most exclusive charity gala, a glittering event filled with socialites, celebrities, and media cameras capturing every interaction. But Marcus was never satisfied with admiration alone. He thrived on asserting dominance, reminding everyone around him of his position. Across from him stood Jamal Thompson, a young chef with dreams bigger than the small catering company he had painstakingly built. Jamal had spent years perfecting his craft, learning flavors from his grandmother's old recipes, experimenting late into the night with seasonings and sauces. For him, cooking was more than just food. It was storytelling, history, and heart combined in each dish. Tonight was supposed to be an opportunity, a chance to show his talent on a stage far larger than any kitchen he'd ever worked in. The room shimmered with crystal glasses and fine china as Jamal carried a tray toward Marcus, his palms slightly damp beneath his chef's coat. Each plate cradled a small piece of his labor, a smoky, spice-rubbed short rib delicately topped with a tangy blackberry reduction, garnished with fresh herbs and a hint of citrus zest. The aroma alone was intoxicating, a complex mix of savory, sweet, and subtle heat that told the story of careful preparation and passion. Jamal took a deep breath, hoping the flavors would speak louder than words. Marcus's gaze followed him, detached and calculating, a faint smirk curling on his lips. When Jamal reached the table, he offered the dish with a polite, if nervous, smile. "I hope you enjoy it, Mr. Blake," he said, his voice steady despite the flutter in his chest. Marcus leaned back, crossing one leg over the other, and surveyed the dish as if he were judging a school project rather than a professional chef's signature creation. He raised one eyebrow, his lips twisting into a sneer. "Really? You expect people to pay for this?" His voice carried across the room, sharp, cutting, impossible to ignore. Every head turned toward them, and the gentle hum of conversation froze mid-sentence. The audacity of the question struck Jamal like a physical blow. Shame heated Jamal's cheeks, but it was quickly replaced by something far more powerful: anger. How dare this man, sitting in his designer chair, belittle years of dedication, hours of practice, and the countless nights Jamal had sacrificed sleep to perfect his craft? Marcus's laughter, quiet but full of derision, felt like it was aimed directly at every ounce of Jamal's hard work. The room's eyes seemed to pierce through him, adding weight to the insult. For a moment, Jamal felt a strange disconnect from the gala's glittering surface, the crystal chandeliers, the polished floors, the laughter and clinking of glasses. It all seemed irrelevant compared to the raw intensity of Marcus's contempt. This was more than critique. It was an attempt to erase his effort, to humiliate him for daring to present excellence in a space that Marcus believed belonged only to wealth and influence. But underneath the shock and embarrassment, anger coiled tightly in Jamal's chest. It wasn't just personal, it was universal. How often had he seen talent dismissed because of arrogance or bias, only to be overshadowed by someone who flaunted money instead of skill? This anger burned steadily, a fire that refused to be snuffed out. Jamal's hands clenched lightly at his sides, his mind racing, not with doubt, but with the determination to prove that passion, perseverance, and authenticity could not be so casually dismissed. The room remained quiet, the moment stretching, charged with tension. Marcus sipped his champagne, confident, unaware that he had inadvertently ignited a spark in Jamal that could not be ignored. That spark, fueled by years of silent struggle and ambition, would become the driving force behind what was about to unfold. Jamal inhaled deeply, feeling the heat of the anger settle into a focused resolve. He would not let this mockery define him, or the story of his life's work. Tonight, the fire had been lit, and Jamal Thompson was ready to rise from the shadows of contempt. The gala's grandeur faded behind Jamal Thompson as he slipped away from the main hall, his hands still slightly trembling. The polished floors, glittering chandeliers, and murmurs of admiration seemed distant now, replaced by the sharp echo of Marcus Blake's mocking words. "Really? You expect people to pay for this?" The phrase circled relentlessly in Jamal's mind, each repetition a weight pressing deeper into his chest. It wasn't just the words themselves. It was the tone, the smirk, the quiet certainty with which Marcus dismissed his work, as though years of dedication could be erased with a single sentence. Jamal reached the kitchen, the familiar scents of roasting vegetables and simmering sauces normally a comfort, but tonight they did nothing to soothe the sting. He set the tray down with trembling hands, the short ribs now cold reminders of both his effort and the derision they had met. The applause from a few polite guests earlier seemed hollow compared to the humiliation, like it had never truly existed. Every cheer had been drowned out by the sharp, cutting laugh of someone who believed himself untouchable. He pressed a hand against the cool steel counter, trying to steady himself. Memories of his journey came rushing back. The countless nights he had stayed awake experimenting with spices, the endless trial and error to balance flavors, the handwritten notes passed down from his grandmother's old recipes. He had started with a worn, yellowed cookbook that smelled of cinnamon and vanilla, tracing the notes in her careful handwriting. Those lessons had become the foundation of his career, the heartbeat of every dish he created. And yet, standing in that room of wealthy socialites and critics, it felt as though none of it mattered. Doubt crept in like a slow tide, threatening to wash away his confidence. Maybe Marcus was right. Maybe people like me will never be taken seriously. The thought twisted in his chest. For years, he had believed talent and effort could speak louder than reputation or money, but tonight it felt like an illusion. Every challenge he had overcome, the late nights, the small victories, the minor accolades, suddenly seemed fragile, temporary, insignificant. The weight of that realization was suffocating, pressing against his ribs like a physical burden he could not shake. He sank onto a stool, staring blankly at the empty plates he had used to present his dishes. Each one felt like a symbol of failure, of the world's indifference to his craft. The kitchen, usually a sanctuary of creativity and passion, now seemed like a cage, enclosing him with the echoes of ridicule. His breath came shallow, the rhythm of his heartbeat loud in the silence. He tried to recall the moments when someone had complimented his food, but even those memories felt tainted by Marcus's sneer, as though the praise had been meaningless. Pain isn't always loud. Sometimes it is quiet, a persistent pressure that grows heavier with every thought, every memory, every whisper of self-doubt. Jamal felt it in every fiber of his being, his shoulders heavy, his chest tight, his mind spinning with what-ifs. Was it all for nothing? He wanted to believe that it wasn't, that one person's arrogance couldn't erase years of effort, but the sting was raw, immediate, and impossible to ignore. He closed his eyes and let himself feel the full weight of it, the humiliation, the doubt, the momentary collapse of his confidence. Tears threatened at the corners of his eyes, not just from embarrassment, but from the bitter ache of knowing how much of his life had been poured into something that tonight seemed invisible, unappreciated. And yet, somewhere beneath the pain, a quiet ember flickered, a sense that this moment, as crushing as it felt, might not define him forever. For now, though, the pain was enough. It filled the kitchen, it filled him, and it demanded his attention. Jamal rested his forehead on the cool counter, letting the hurt seep into his bones, feeling the sting of a world that didn't yet understand the value of his gift. Tonight, the humiliation was real. The sting was deep. But in that heavy, suffocating silence, the first faint hint of something else, something stronger than doubt, was beginning to pulse beneath the surface. The kitchen felt quieter now, but not in the way Jamal had expected. The chatter of the gala faded into a dull hum, and the cold weight of shame that had pressed so heavily against him began to shift ever so slightly. He was still seated on the edge of the steel counter, head bowed, when a familiar voice cut through the haze. "Jamal," said Lisa, his sous-chef, stepping into the kitchen with a calm, determined energy. She had been with him for years, a partner in every experiment, every long night of testing flavors and perfecting sauces. Her eyes locked onto his, steady and unwavering. "Don't let him steal your story. Let him eat your truth." The word landed in Jamal's chest like a spark catching on dry kindling. All at once, the doubt that had gnawed at him, the thought that Marcus's words defined his worth, felt smaller, more distant. Lisa wasn't just reminding him of the flavors or the techniques. She was reminding him of why he had started, why he had endured sleepless nights and relentless trial and error. This wasn't just about proving Marcus wrong. It was about affirming the life Jamal had built with his own hands, the voice of his craft that could not be silenced by arrogance or scorn. He rose from the stool, the weight of despair loosening just enough to make room for determination. His hands, once trembling, now moved with renewed purpose. He took a clean plate, carefully reheated a single portion of his signature dish, and began plating it with the precision that came from years of experience. The short rib was tender, perfectly seared. The blackberry reduction glistened like dark jewels across the meat. The herbs and citrus zest crowned the dish with an elegance that mirrored the effort behind it. Every movement was deliberate. Every detail mattered. Jamal felt his heartbeat quicken, not with fear, but with resolve. This bite, this single creation, was not just food, it was a statement. It was a declaration that passion, skill, and dedication could not be dismissed by money or mockery. He stepped out of the kitchen and back into the main hall. The crowd hadn't noticed his return yet, still engaged in polite conversations and the hum of the gala, but all eyes turned as Marcus Blake caught sight of him. Marcus's smirk, that emblem of superiority, lingered briefly, but then it faltered as Jamal approached, steady, unflinching. "Mr. Blake," Jamal said, extending the plate, "this is for you." His voice was calm, even, carrying the quiet weight of confidence rather than challenge. Marcus raised an eyebrow, curiosity flickering across his features. He leaned back slightly, as though expecting the dish to disappoint again, yet something about Jamal's presence, the controlled certainty in his movements, the intensity behind his gaze, demanded attention. Jamal watched as Marcus lifted the fork, and the room seemed to hold its breath. One bite, and everything shifted. Marcus froze, his hands suspended mid-air. His eyes widened, a flash of disbelief crossing his features. The taste, the complexity, the harmony of flavors, it was undeniable. He blinked rapidly, his usual arrogance stripped away, leaving only astonishment. This is incredible," Marcus whispered, almost pleading, his voice low and reverent. "Tell me, how did you make this?" For the first time all evening, Jamal felt the heavy weight of shame lift. A swell of hope surged through him, more than just the hope for recognition. This was affirmation that talent, perseverance, and heart could break through barriers of arrogance, that skill and dedication could shine even in a room built to impress with wealth and status alone. Lisa, standing just behind him, smiled knowingly, her eyes reflecting the pride that had bolstered him. Jamal returned a small, confident smile, feeling the ember of hope flare into a quiet, steady flame. He had not only preserved his dignity, he had transformed the moment of ridicule into proof that excellence could not be denied. In that instant, amid the crystal glasses and soft chatter of the gala, Jamal realized something profound. Hope was no longer fragile. It was alive, pulsing through him, guiding the next steps of his journey. The spark Lisa had ignited had become a force, propelling him forward, unshaken, ready for the triumph that awaited. The news spread like wildfire. Within hours of the gala, stories about Jamal Thompson's victory over mockery began circulating across social media, online news outlets, and lifestyle magazines. Headlines praised the young chef for his courage, skill, and unshakable composure in the face of public humiliation. Clips of the moment Marcus Blake took that first bite went viral, shared thousands of times with captions celebrating talent over arrogance. For Jamal, it was surreal. What had started as a single act of defiance in a crowded hall had blossomed into a recognition far greater than he could have imagined. Invitations began arriving almost immediately, collaborations with renowned restaurants, appearances at food festivals, and opportunities to host cooking masterclasses. Each letter, each email, was a reminder that the world could recognize genuine talent when it met authenticity and passion. Jamal had worked tirelessly for years, quietly building his craft in small kitchens, and now that dedication was finally visible on a stage as grand as he had ever dreamed. The sting of mockery that had once threatened to define him had transformed into a force that propelled him forward. Marcus Blake, too, found himself confronting an unexpected shift. The billionaire, accustomed to commanding admiration and bending people to his expectations, now approached Jamal differently. He was humbled, a little embarrassed by his earlier arrogance, but also genuinely curious. Invitations for private tastings became a regular occurrence, with Marcus seeking not just indulgence, but instruction. He wanted to understand the craft, the nuance, the artistry of flavors that had once seemed trivial in his eyes. In this reversal, Jamal realized that triumph didn't always require hostility. It could be quiet, profound, and transformative, turning former critics into students. Months passed, and Jamal's small catering business began to flourish beyond his wildest dreams. A sense of purpose and pride now accompanied each dish he prepared, each event he attended, and each class he led. But it wasn't the attention, the collaborations, or even the growing clientele that gave him the most satisfaction. It was the ripple effect, seeing the inspiration his story had ignited in others. Aspiring chefs, young and old, began sharing their experiences of overcoming doubt, embracing their passion, and daring to present their talents even when the world seemed dismissive. Jamal's journey became a beacon, proof that perseverance, skill, and heart could break through arrogance, prejudice, and discouragement. One morning, months after the gala, Jamal stood in his bustling kitchen, sunlight streaming through the large windows. The aroma of roasted vegetables, fresh herbs, and simmering sauces filled the air, a comforting symphony of scents that had once been his refuge and now symbolized achievement. Around him, young apprentices moved with eagerness, their hands learning the precise movements that he had spent years perfecting. One apprentice, in particular, carefully plated a portion of the signature short rib that had changed everything. Jamal watched silently, pride swelling in his chest, as the apprentice's hands mirrored his own from that pivotal night. He smiled quietly to himself. From the sting of humiliation, a victory had grown, one that was not just his own, but one that uplifted everyone who had ever felt underestimated, dismissed, or overlooked. Every glance, every smile, every careful measurement in the kitchen was a testament to resilience, to the quiet power of believing in one's craft, even when the world had seemed to turn away. In that kitchen, amidst the clatter of pots and the hum of focused conversation, Jamal felt the full weight of what he had achieved. It wasn't just fame or success. It was recognition of his dedication, proof that talent and perseverance could shine through ridicule, and the ability to inspire others to embrace their potential without fear. The spark Lisa had ignited months ago had grown into a steady flame, a light that would guide him and countless others toward possibilities they might once have thought unattainable. Jamal Thompson had turned a moment of mockery into a legacy of respect, talent, and inspiration. The journey had begun with anger and pain, had passed through hope, and now culminated in triumph, a triumph that was both personal and profoundly universal, a reminder that true skill, patience, and heart can conquer even the harshest judgments.